I'm so happy to introduce you guys to Josh Goldstein. Has a really unique story, and we're going to be going into some of the details of that story, how he overcame cancer and decided to build this empire of a short-term rental business. Me and Josh have been good friends for a good amount of time so far. Seems like years. I feel like I've known him for so long. We just have really good energy, and he's got a lot of really good insights on how to scale, how to buy multi-unit, like cabins, 5 cabins on one lot. He has a lot of experience with a lot of different things, but I think one of his big specialties, which I'm really excited to talk about today, is going to be about his whole upbringing into finding money in places that you never thought to check, to take existing assets and being able to utilize them to fund more deals and get more things done. Josh Goldstein.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So what I really want to go into, let's first just introduce yourself. Maybe, I know I gave a little bit of introduction, but can you maybe explain a little bit about how you had your upbringing and what you're doing now?
Sure. I am a producer by trade. I mainly do commercials, but I've worked all over the entertainment industry, some movies, music videos, TV. I've landed on commercials as my niche right now, and it keeps me pretty busy, but I'm freelance, so I can pick and choose the jobs that I like. For the longest time, being freelance, I felt like I had to take everything. And turning down work is difficult when you don't have a 9 to 5 that you're guaranteed a salary every week, every month. And there's a fear of, what if this goes away? And I've been doing it long enough that I know that the work was always going to come in. But, you already mentioned, but I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2015. And this was at a time when we bought a new house. I sold my last house, bought a new house, and we were renovating it. We were using the money from the sale of the old house to renovate and make it our dream house. And as I was sinking everything I had into it, went into debt to finish and everything, I got the diagnosis, and the doctors basically said, you're not going to be able to work because you're going to have treatment. You're going to be busy and pretty beaten down with all the treatments that I was doing. So obviously it was something I didn't expect, and I didn't have backup plans. I was in debt trying to make this house what it is and didn't know what to do. So what I did do is I focused on healing. I focused on the treatment. I focused on being with my family during that time. We did have friends and family that kind of rallied around and helped me out monetarily just to get by. My sister even raised some money for me at some point to help with sending me to Baltimore for the surgery, because we basically moved there for a month. With all that, I mean, like, medical bills piled up, finishing the renovations, like those bills piled up, and I just went into debt. And when I did finally recover, I recovered at the end of 2015, and I'm fully clear now and have been ever since then. And the one thing that happened during that time is I did read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I knew that I needed something else to do outside of my industry. And after I read it, it was like a light bulb went off that should have gone off when I was your age. I wish I had started back then. When I read it, it's obviously more of a mindset book versus, how to do it. I couldn't do that much because I was still so overwhelmed with all the treatments I was doing and everything that was going on. So I kept that in my back pocket. Once I recovered, I jumped back into work as hard as I could and just took every job. I was working like crazy, got out of debt. While I was doing that, I discovered BRRRR. I was listening to podcasts. I was reading books. I was attending webinars. I started going to meetups, doing everything that I could to learn as much as I could to launch this new business that I was looking into. And took me several years, I would say, of learning and analysis paralysis. I think I made offers on properties in different markets and sticking to my numbers and being pretty hardcore. I think I backed out of some deals over $500 or something, which now looking back at it, that's nothing. And if the deal doesn't work over $500, it was a good deal to start with, but they were, and I just didn't realize it yet. But it led me to an episode on BRRRR where a woman was talking about turnkey rentals in Kansas City, Missouri. And I had always been adverse to turnkey because I wanted to capture the equity. I wanted to capture everything. And how she broke it down, it just made so much sense. And especially for the first deal, I was like, you know what? I really needed to go towards that. I actually reached out to her and she responded, and I asked if she had any property management recommendations for me. And she sent me a couple, and I started getting a deal flow from one of the property management companies. And December 2019, I got one of the deals they called it a holiday special, and it was $70,000. They said I was worth 90, already had a renter in there for $800. And it was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath in Kansas City, Missouri. And so I looked at the comps myself. It looked to me like 90 seemed pretty solid. So it came with 20,000 of built-in equity, and it was a low purchase price. So I said, you know what, let's do it. And so I did it. And 2 weeks into escrow, the underwriter backed out because I was only going to put 20% down. And they said, because it's being sold by a property management company, the underwriter didn't feel comfortable. It wasn't a traditional deal for them. I had a choice, and my choice was I had some money saved up at the time, and I made a choice to proceed with cash and buy it just outright at $70,000. And I did that. And I was on vacation with my family when the first check hit my account, and $800 rent minus property management fees, it was 790 something, which isn't going to change my life, but I was blown away. I was blown away that I was on vacation, and I looked at my banking account and I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. From that, I said, I do need to pull that equity out. Like, I don't want to own this in cash. And so I found this time an investment friendly lender and got it appraised, tried to do a cash out refi. And without touching it at all, I call this my accidental BRRRR. It appraised for $116,000. And so, yeah, it was a little bit above 90, what I initially thought. And I was able to pull out $74,000, which is the full amount plus closing costs. So I was just supercharged after that. I was like, I got a free house. And after all expenses, I'm being paid about $150 a month or so. And this is amazing. And you look at it and it's $150 a month. It is not a ton of money. Mindset wise, what I kept telling myself and what made the most sense to me is that this is $150 a month that someone is paying into a savings account for me. So this house to me is almost like a piggy bank, like a savings account. Someone else is paying it off. At this point, I have no money in it. So to me, there's no downside. It's amazing. And so that's how it all started off. And from there, I also thought it was a little daunting trying to scale a bunch of $150 a month properties to get to something where it was significant for my life. And that's when I stumbled upon Avery Carl on the Bigger Pockets podcast. And she was the short-term rental queen. And everything she said just made so much sense. And so as soon as I heard it, I reached out to her as well. She's an agent in the Smoky Mountains, and she was living in Nashville at the time. And we'd probably chatted for an hour and a half about cabins and this, that, and the other. And from there, I just started looking at a ton of cabins there. And I found a place in February, and it was 2 cabins on 2 acres of land, a 3-3 and a 2-2. And it was $635,000. So that's quite a bit more than my very small $70,000 3-bedroom house in Kansas City. But one thing that I did do in between closing on the Kansas City house and this next purchase is I did a HELOC on my primary residence. And luckily, because I bought my house as a short sale and I renovated it and we put a lot of money into it, the equity just grew exponentially. So we had quite a bit of money or equity in our house. And so instead of just letting it sit there, using that money to buy things for myself, I used that money towards this first short-term rental deal. And so that's what led me to that. Closed on that. Literally the day everything was shutting down. It was March 2020. I told Avery I didn't know if a notary was even going to be open because it was the day that everything shut down. Found a notary and we closed the deal. And from there, I just took my time to find cleaners, maintenance people. Avery and Luke helped me out with that and replaced linens, replaced a couple of pieces of furniture. worked on the listings. And by the time I listed, I think my first booking was a 28-day booking. And this is in the height of the beginning of COVID. And it was a family that wanted to get away and be in the woods and not around anyone. And that was for the 2-2. And then the 3-3 started booking. And by May, June of 2020, it was just gangbusters. It was nonstop. And so then that's when I really got the bug to just expand more and more and more.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know that was a lot. That was a very long answer.
That was much needed though. For the people that don't know you, Josh, I think that's an inspiring story. And it's crazy how your first deal was not anything it wasn't a crazy big deal. It wasn't jumping in and trying to get a full rehab done and all this other stuff, which is similar to what I did. I thought I was supposed to get into a property that had to be a full BRRRR or something like that. And everyone told me you should never buy a turnkey. And the fact that you bought something for less than it was actually worth and were able to appreciate and get almost pretty much a full BRRRR out of it,
Yeah, I got a
just
full
goes
BRRRR
to
on that
show. Yeah. And the crazy thing is you could have bought that property outright and
Yeah.
you did,
Yeah.
but you still wanted to get financing on it. So
Exactly.
what was your thinking behind that? Did you just want an easy way to get into your first deal, or what was your thought process?
Like you, I was very adverse to turnkey. And when I listened to that podcast, that changed my mind. She just broke it down of, look, and I know every investor says this on podcasts, and sometimes it's almost frustrating when you haven't done your first deal, but it's like the first deal is the most important. The first deal is the most important. And now being someone who has done it, I agree. And doing a $70,000 house as turnkey to me was almost like proof of concept. So it wasn't very risky for me in terms of the amount of capital that I had to put out. I did have to put out more than I was expecting because I paid cash. But at the end of the day, I had been learning about BRRRRs and listening to David Green talking about long distance real estate investing and stuff like that. That's what I always knew I wanted to do. So the fact that this turnkey turned into a BRRRR, when I realized there was more equity, and especially I felt like I lucked out that I had to pay cash, because if I got financing on it right away, I probably would have just put the $14,000 in and not even thought about it again. But now that I had a bigger chunk in, I was like, I need to get that out. I need that money to put towards more deals. No matter how much it was, how much I got out, even if it appraised for 70,000, I still wanted it back so that I could take that and use it for something else. So that was my main motivation. And because I was in analysis paralysis for a couple of years, several years, that it just made sense to me. And then when that refi did go through and I got that money back, it was just mind blown. I got a free house. It was insane.
It's like when you get your first guest and you get the first payout on your first guest, and it's $1,000 or something. Right now, you're just like, it's nothing.
Yeah, whatever.
But at the time, you're just like, wow, $1,000. This is crazy. So I totally get that. Why analysis paralysis for so many years? What really made you start at that point and not earlier?
I think it's scary. And it's like when you are learning this stuff, it's all theoretical, obviously. And sometimes you're like, are people scamming me? Or what is this world? It was so new to me. And I had purchased houses. Like I had purchased my first house and then sold it. And then now we're in the house that we renovated and bought. So like I've done real estate deals, but just for my primary residence. But for some reason, like buying out of state, I've never been to Kansas City, Missouri in my life. And I have 7 doors there. And I base those deals solely on my property manager, what they like in areas and what rents they feel like they can get. And then talking to contractors and how much things will cost to renovate and stuff like that. And I don't really have a plan to go there unless I really just want to meet the people that I've been working with, just more on a personal level. I think all the years of analysis paralysis, I didn't get it. And I was sticking to my numbers so hardcore that I would pass deals that if I still had some of those deals that I passed by over a difference of $500 or whatever, 1,000, couple thousand, they would have been big winners, but I didn't have the foresight of that. I was just trying to be as careful as I possibly could, which is good. You should be careful. However, at some point you have to just pull the trigger, and that's how you're going to learn the most. And that's like when, instead of it being in theory, it becomes practical at that point. And that's when you really get it. And that's why that first deal is so important.
What was the turning point that made you eventually get the deal? Was the podcast episode?
It was that podcast episode. Yeah. And reaching out to them, getting a couple of property management companies that I could chat with and really start to see a deal flow from them. And I even turned down one of the one of the turnkey deals that I first was putting an offer in on, because there are some things that the inspection came back and they weren't willing to fix it, and I didn't want to pay for it either. And so I backed out. But then the next month, that holiday special that they branded came around, and everything made sense to me for that deal.
That's great. So you got that first deal, long-term rentals, found out about short-term rentals through Avery Carl, blew your mind, started cash flowing like crazy. You're at 2 rentals. What's next?
Yeah. So the first short-term rental deal, it was actually 2 cabins. So it was a 3-3 and a 2-2. And as soon as, like you said, like when you're waiting for that first booking, and that was a weird time because it was COVID, things were shut down, people weren't traveling for a couple months, whatever. So when I actually went live, I think I was like refreshing and trying to see like how many people were looking at my page, and I didn't see any metrics at all. And like, I didn't realize that there's a delay in that. So I think I called Airbnb and said, is there something wrong? I don't understand. Is it actually live? And they calmed me down, and I probably was texting Avery and Luke about this too.
I would love to see those messages.
I might have to scroll back through to see if I have them, and then like, obviously the next day, like the metrics did start to go up. And then I got that first booking. And like you said, that first booking is like an adrenaline boost.
It's a huge adrenaline boost.
And it just proves to you like, oh my God, this works. And because of that and how much money you get versus long-term rentals, I was like, I need to figure out how to buy more of those. And so I did want to try to balance short-term rentals and long-term rentals. So I continued looking in Kansas City, Missouri, and I continued looking in the Smokies. And while I was looking in the Smokies, a friend of mine was telling me that I had to go look at Idlewild, California. And it's this small mountain town. It's the mountains above Palm Springs, basically. And it's a tiny mountain town, really cute. It does snow there during the winters. And then during the summers and spring, it's just beautiful nature. It's in the woods. And there's a ton of like really beautiful retro cabins that are not updated. And I'm not saying to ruin the charm of those cabins, but it would be nice to have a beautiful, charming cabin that had some nice amenities.
I think you were telling me that some of the cabins didn't even have air conditioning.
Oh, most of them don't. Most of them.
Yeah. There's certain cabins in markets like the Smoky Mountains where it's really, you need to have a hot tub, you need to have air conditioning, you need to have all this because it's more competitive. And then there's areas like Idlewild where it's not common. So you coming into a market like that, how were you able to differentiate and dominate in that kind of market?
And it's funny because my friend told me I had to go visit and check it out because he knew what I was starting to do. And so I had never been, I'd always heard of it. And I always heard how amazing and beautiful it was. And so this A-frame came up on the market and I saw it immediately. And I looked at my wife and we were both like, oh my God, this looks amazing. Let's take a trip up there. And so this was June of 2020. The market was still very unsure, to say the least, about real estate. And we booked an Airbnb. We booked a different airframe, more in town. And we stayed there and we went and visited this A-frame. And we had the real estate agent like show us a bunch of other cabins as well. And this is at a time when there weren't multiple offers. Things were sitting there still. And I think it was listed for $300,000. And I was hesitating. I hate to say it, but I didn't love the other cabins as much as this A-frame. We kept thinking about it. And I was like, I'm like, it's at the end of this dirt road. It's not maintained by the county. And it's like kind of this bumpy dirt road, but it's like, once you get there, it's magical. You feel like you're by yourself there, and you're surrounded by woods. And we have one neighbor across the street, but they're barely there and you can't even really see them when you're in the cabin. And when you look out back, it's just a beautiful view. And we decided to put in an offer. And I think we offered $250,000. So 50,000 under asking. And they came back and countered at 275, and we immediately said yes. And we closed, and we knew immediately, like, as charming as this A-frame was, we wanted to add some luxury amenities. So one major expense that we first saw was when you walk out the back, I think there was a 3-foot deck. So you could stand there, and that area is where the view was. We were like, this is so underutilized, because you could stand there, appreciate the view, but that's it. You're just standing there. And they had these little almost card chairs. And so if you sit down, the railing is right at your eyes. So you're not really appreciating like this amazing view that this cabin could have. So we talked to some contractors and we expanded the deck. We expanded, I think it's a foot deck now. And so we have table and chairs and like these Adirondack chairs, a barbecue. And so it's like this space that you could hang out, you could really enjoy back there. And because of that, like the view is really showcased. And so that was probably one of the biggest things that we did. But on top of that, as you mentioned, we were renovating during the summer. And this is during 2020, the kids were not in school. I guess it was the summer, they weren't in school. So we were staying there during the renovations a lot. It got so hot there that at a certain point, we're like, we have to go home. This is unbearable. And so we had talked about air conditioning, and with an A-frame, it's a little tricky because the duct work and stuff like that. So we talked to a company, they came out and they suggested doing 2 mini splits in each bedroom. The loft bedroom, which it's the main area. So the heating and the cool would pour out into that main area. And then the downstairs bedroom is its own thing. But if you leave the door open, or even if it's closed, it can acclimate for whatever you set it at. So we did it. And we made a vow, like, we're not coming back until the air conditioning is in, because it was rough. I mean, it was really hot. And once that was back in, we came back up. And the other things that we did is we replaced pretty much all the furniture. We made it just really nice decor, like higher end decor, I would say, because we felt like our market was Los Angeles and Southern California, where people are expecting like nicer stays. And then we wanted a hot tub, and being out in Idlewild under the stars, and it's so dark and quiet and beautiful there, just being out and being in a hot tub is magical. So we built another little deck and put a hot tub on that. And yeah, those were the main things we did. We fixed up a bunch of things like just paint and making it pretty and stuff like that. But the 3 main things were air conditioning, the deck, and the hot tub. And then beyond that, we just focused on decor and making it look as nice as possible.
How is that property doing ever since you listed it and made it so much better than everyone else's?
It's the little A-frame that could. So I was probably all in. We probably spent $80,000 to $90,000 on the renovations, plus like including decor and everything. And I think the first year, I think we made the gross about 100, and we were all in for what, $360,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd say it was a grand slam. And that's another one that once we were done with the renovations, we had it appraised and we pulled money out again. And so it was a burster.
Did you get a free Airbnb as well? Is that what it was?
Pretty much. I didn't pull out everything in that one, because also being in a mountain town like that, you're looking at the comps, all the other cabins that it was comped against were not updated, but they were selling at a certain rate. And we definitely increased the equity quite a bit from the appraisal, but they definitely weren't looking at the amenities that we added. But the amenities that we added, what they did do is make it book like crazy and very much in demand. The cash flow is huge on that one.
What do you usually look for in a deal? Do you like taking on deals that are interesting, or do you enjoy taking on deals that have good cash flow or cash on cash? What are your metrics?
We love architecture and we love great design. And ultimately it does come down to the numbers. But when we're looking for a deal, we would rather do value add and put our spin on whatever cabin we're getting. And I know I didn't start that way, but it led to that. And once we did the A-frame and pretty much every other cabin, we renovated. And so I look at not only a cabin that the numbers work for, but something like it has interesting architecture, something that we could make amazing in our eyes. And so that it would stand out against its competition. And it's A-frames there's a cult community for A-frames that people want to buy, people want to stay at. And I don't blame them. It's such a fun, old school, mountainy type of vibe that it's just such a nice feeling to get there and you're just at peace.
That's great. And how did you fund these deals?
I think I mentioned before I bought the first 2 short-term rentals, I got a HELOC. So on my primary residence, we had a ton of equity and I tapped into it just by saying, hey, this is what my house is worth. Obviously they appraised it to double check that. And then they gave me a line of credit that I use that as my hard money. And so now when I look at deals, instead of going to a hard money lender, which there's nothing wrong with doing that either, as long as the numbers work, I got to do that. And it's a very cheap hard money lender because the interest rates on a HELOC are so much less than what you would get for hard money. So I've been taking chunks of money, purchasing, renovating, refining, putting it back in the line of credit and repeating. Obviously, I have been working as a producer this whole entire time too. So I would put some of my own cash in just to grow even faster than if I only used my line of credit. But for the most part, my line of credit was like my golden key to scale this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, eventually, once you tap into certain equity or assets or different things like that to jumpstart you, everything else, you start self-funding yourself through the short-term rents and it just keeps funding everything else that you build. So in the beginning, it gets a little tricky, but I feel like you've gotten to the point where you're funding not only through your producing, but you're funding through your actual income coming from short-term rents.
My first renovation, I tend to take on maybe too many things at once, but I think, so I was renovating Idlewild. At the same time, we purchased another cabin in the Smoky Mountains and we were renovating that. And then somewhere in there, I found this, it was a duplex and a house next to each other. It was a wholesale deal, my first wholesale deal in Kansas City, Missouri. And it needed updating, but not a ton. It was like, I think each unit needed about $15,000 to $20,000. But when I bought it, it had some tenants. So I didn't have to put $45,000 in right away. It was like, I think when I bought it, one tenant moved out. So then we focused on turning that unit, put $15,000 in, made it nice, got it rented out again. And then 6 months later, next tenant might have moved out. And then basically like now they're all updated. And because of that, the rents have increased and it's fully operational. And that's another one I was able to pull out all my money and I actually made money on that one when I did the refi. So I think I made like $30,000, $40,000 cash back, like on top of, what I put in from my line of credit.
It's amazing. So how many rentals do you have right now? I feel like there's one more big purchase that you had, right?
There is.
And can you talk about that, the 5 cabins?
Yeah. So right now we're at 20 doors. We have 11 short-term rentals and 9 long-term rentals. Of the 11, 6 of them we're renovating. But one of those 6 was a cabin that was already on one of my properties. And so it had a long-term tenant in it. They moved out. We're renovating that. Good news is there's no holding costs because it's already operating with the cabin that's being rented out on as a short-term rental already. So it's amazing. That one we should be done hopefully by the beginning of next year. But then in June of this year, I found and purchased 5 cabins on 7 acres of land. And
you guys see a trend here, cabins?
Yeah.
He really likes the cabins.
I do like the cabins. And these cabins I went to several contractors and a couple contractors that were pretty hot in the remodel circle in the Smokies, basically said, don't buy this. It's too much. But I kept grinding and looking to see how I could make this work. And they all needed to be gutted. And I knew that. And so I was going into it knowing how much work needed to be done. but I also saw the vision of what it will be. It's 7 acres of land. It has its own pond. It has a gazebo out front where there's a fire pit, and there's a shed that's on it, like a huge shed that we're turning into a game room. And we're going to create all this community space, and it's almost going to become like an adult camp. So you could either rent out all the units at once and have a big reunion, or all your friends and family or whatever, or they just rent individually. And then while you're there, you might meet some cool people and have a good time anyways. So that's our end vision for it. We're definitely in the thick of it right now, but we're pretty excited to get that one finished and up and running.
Oh yeah. And that big vision is so cool. And it's like you're working on more and more interesting projects as time goes on, because you have this capital build up and this confidence in the space. Have you noticed that your first deal was a long-term rental turnkey, and then you started doing BRRRRs, and then like it just, now you're taking on these big projects where people are telling you can't do that, and you're just like, you know what? I'm going to prove you guys this, I can make this work. And you will. And you will. Yeah. And that's the really fun thing about real estate is you can get super creative with things, and you've demonstrated that through your journey. For people that are starting out, what would you recommend and advise those people?
I'm going to go back to taking action. I feel like I sat for so long on the sidelines, just looking at deals, analyzing and turning them down because this littlest thing, which again, don't fault that at all. It was part of my journey, and it's what led me to where I am. But this didn't start scaling until I actually went into action. And so once I proved it in the physical sense versus theoretical, that's when everything just clicked. And once I figure something out, I am just pedal to the metal and I go.
Yeah. And so what's your why? You still have your producing job. It doesn't look like you're going to quit that anytime soon. Why do short-term rentals? Why buy real estate assets? There has to be more to it. So what's the reason?
When I went through cancer, and like our mindset during cancer, I got to thank my wife. She's a rock star. She is one of the most positive people. When I was diagnosed, she wasn't with me. I was in the hospital. She was with the kids. And I called her and I told her that what the doctor said. And instead of freaking out and crying, her response was, all right, let's figure this out. And so like that just set a tone for the rest of the time of, we're not going to look at the negative. We're going to freaking out and screaming doesn't solve the problem. Actually researching and talking. We talked to a ton of survivors. We talked to people who had actually had success in this, which can apply to anything, not just obviously beating a sickness, but if you want to do real estate, talk to someone who has success in it. How did they do it and replicate that? That's how we took our mindset of it. I think we wanted to create a life where I wasn't a slave to being freelance. The problem is with freelance, it's great because I can turn down jobs if I want, but if I turn down jobs, I'm not getting paid. And so if I'm turning down jobs, I want to go on vacation with my family, I'm paying for this vacation, losing money by turning down jobs. And it's stressful because then you get back and maybe you lost several jobs because you turned down that one. It can happen. So my main goal of starting this journey was not only to never be in that position when I was diagnosed again, but so that I can pick and choose my jobs when I want to. And being freelance is great because I do enjoy my job, but I love my family and I love going on vacation with them. And I love playing tennis as much as possible and going skiing with my kids or whatever it might be. So I can turn down the jobs that I don't want to do and just spend time with my family, spend time on real estate and be at home and just enjoy life with my family more.
That's amazing. And you seem honestly like such a happy guy. I don't know if that's just you putting up a front, but it seems very genuine to me. And I just don't know. I feel like you have this outlook on life where it's very positive, and just I appreciate that. It's just such a good energy to be around in general.
Positivity is like a big thing in our life, and I'm a positive person as well, but my wife even takes it to another level. So I feel like we feed off of each other, and we just want to create a lifestyle that works for us and our positivity and the people that we have around. And this real estate really helped us with that.
Is that what makes you happy every day? Waking up, spending time with your family, working on real estate? What's like your ideal day? What does that look like for you? And are you living that right now?
What's that?
Are you living your ideal day right now? Are you living the dream that you always wanted to live?
It's pretty nice right now. Yeah. I play way more tennis than I ever have. My kids are playing tennis. My wife started learning a year ago. She's obsessed with tennis now. So we're like a full on tennis family. But not only that, like I grew up playing tennis. And so to me, something like tennis, and you could replace this with any activity that you love. It's something that I turn off my brain to the production world, the real estate world, whatever. All I'm focused on is the strategy of how am I going to win? Where's the ball going? How am I moving? And that's all I'm thinking about. It's like a meditation for me, even though I'm only focused on that because I'm giving myself a break from all the other normal stuff that I have going on in my life. And so I feel like my wife feels that as well. She has fun. She's met new friends with it. And it's just been great. Our life it's awesome. It's like, I get to drop the kids off at school or pick them up. I get to play tennis. We get to go on vacation if we want to. Besides, obviously, we're not pulling them out of school. So that's the one thing. But besides that, it's like we can go on vacation. We could plan vacations. Before, I never was able to plan vacations because if a job popped up, a lot of times I would have to back out of the vacation. And
didn't you say that you used to go on vacation worrying, or whenever you schedule a vacation, you'd worry that a big job would come up?
The opposite. We always joke that if work is ever slow, all I need to do is schedule a vacation and then a big job would pop up, which always happened. I don't know why.
Yeah, but nowadays you can technically say no and not have to think about, oh, the ramifications of what that would do to your financial situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the beauty. I think you're almost there to your ideal lifestyle. I think once you get that Palm Springs home with the full tennis court in the backyard, you're there. You've made it. I think that's like the next step.
Definitely things that we would like that we are building towards, and we're not quite there yet, but it will come. We're patient. We're very happy with where we are. And if I just keep building like this, it's going to happen eventually.
100%. I'm just joking with you. I know at the end of the day, you're just happy with where you are right now. So I guess let's go into the next question. What's next for Josh? What's Josh working on? What is Josh looking for?
Really excited to get all these renovations done and get them up and running. Because when you're renovating a short-term rental or putting money and hard work into it, it's stressful because I am using money from real estate to fund that. And once that's clear and it's actually making money versus draining money, it's just a load off. But besides that, I am in a mastermind that you are also part of, and we are looking at boutique hotels and larger deals so that we could scale. So this would be the first time taking outside investments. All my properties that I've done so far, I've self-funded with my line of credit and just by working as hard as I could to save up as much money as I possibly could. In order to fully scale, I feel like the next step is taking my experience in renovating these cabins and what I'm doing with the 5 cabins, but on a slightly bigger scale, and creating a fun experience for visitors and guests and turning it around and making investors money and making us money. And it's a win-win for everyone.
That's great. And I'm going to ask you the last question. What book do you recommend to people? I have a feeling you mentioned it before, so I don't know if that's the one. It doesn't have to be real estate related, but I just want to know what your favorite book is.
How about I'll mention 2? But one, you are correct. It is Rich Dad Poor Dad. When I read it,
classic.
It's something that it frustrated me that I didn't realize this earlier on. It's something that my entire life, like I loved real estate. I loved looking at houses. I loved design of houses. I loved looking at markets and how much things were selling for or not selling for or whatever. But for whatever reason, it never clicked in me that could be a way to make money. It was just something like, I felt like if you were a real estate investor, you needed like a top hat and a monocle or something. When I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, again, it made me a little mad that I didn't realize it before, but it also lit a fire under me. And that's what led me to actually learn how to do it. And then the other book I would love to recommend is a book called Shoe Dog, which is the Nike story. And just seeing a company as big as Nike and going into the inner workings of how, like, the struggles that they went through to start this company. And it was always an underdog, which is crazy to me because now Nike is synonymous with all sports. And they're like, that's the top tier. Seeing them, how they grew and struggled, and it's just so inspiring to see that and to where it goes now. Like, it's pretty awesome.
That is amazing. And so where can people find you, reach out to you? Do you have any preference for if people want to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. The account is Bunkhouse Worldwide. And we're posting some of our investing journey there and showcasing some of the cabins that we're doing and posting progress of the cabins we're renovating and stuff like that, and reposting podcasts like this, little snippets of things that we just feel are important to learning about real estate investing. So you could DM me there, follow me there. And
yeah. And Josh, thank you so much. I know you're being very vulnerable on here, and I appreciate you sharing your message and helping inspire other people, just like Shoe Dog inspired you. You're passing it along, and yeah, just an amazing story. So thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier on, I feel like we've created such a great relationship and friendship that I love your positivity. Talking about positivity, I feel like maybe that's why we are drawn to each other. And it's inspiring to see you at your age just launch and understand and just go. And I'm jealous. I wish I did it when I was your age, but it's going to be fun to see where you go with this, because, you know,
you're amazing. Thanks, Josh. You're gonna make me blush on camera. Hopefully
I'm trying.
version.
I'm trying.
Thank you so much, Josh.